podcast. I'm in Max. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello, and welcome to Season 22, Episode 13 of Happy Hex Crawl podcast. My name is Stu.
Lucky 13. This is Tappy. This is Jim.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jim.
How's it going? How busy are your days these last week or so?
Well, I have to tell you, man, it's been really rough last few days because things sort of blown up. We have like 132 events just in RPGs, not counting the multiple events that we have on Games on Demand as well, which should bring us up way into the 160s.
Let me just say that Jim is the RPG...
I am the supervisor of RPGs and a board member in Strategicon, who has 3 conventions a year, two of which you guys are great and show up to. And we have Orcon in February, we have GameX in May, and here in the end of August, September, we have Gateway. And there are, for those of you who are unfamiliar, and I don't know how you can be a listener of this program and be unfamiliar, but if you're a new listener, it's a gaming convention that's run by gamers for gamers. It's a non-profit organization that basically just puts on these conventions and makes sure that the hobby of tabletop gaming is promoted and give everybody a safe place to come over here, gather, join with their community, play with people that they might not necessarily play with at home, and enjoy games and events that they may or may not be able to enjoy at home. Larger scale type stuff. That's really cool. And I personally run the role-playing department, which is why I fell in with you guys, and it's literally blowing up. I was actually a little disappointed that we didn't have as many events during GameX, but in Gateway, I had to reach out to other departments for space.
Oh, that's great.
That's great. I filled up every single one. And it's not just, Saturday craze balls. It's Saturday, Sunday. I filled a whole lot of rooms on Friday.
Nice.
A lot of Friday games. So I call it the room Tetris game was a little bit difficult this time around. And so, a lot of fun stuff to do. Excuse me. Ranging from video games all the way down to classic card games and everything in between. Board games galore. We have a whole ballroom that's devoted to nothing but miniatures and board games. We have a fantastic exhibitors hall with people selling wares. Not only games, but cool geeky related stuff. And also role-playing games of every ilk, including LARPs, which just got a new head of the department this year, and we went from 5 or 6 LARP events, 1 or 2 that never went off, to about a dozen or so now.
Wow! Holy metric!
So hey, put in somebody that's passionate about growing a department. And when we are having space issues, and my buddy Mike, who unfortunately couldn't be here, who is in charge of assigning space at the convention, was like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" I'm like, "We're in a hell of our own making."
Right.
We're the one that demanded that certain departments get more attention. Now that they do have that attention and they want more space, we're like,
Right.
So
you have over a dozen LARPs?
Yeah,
Wow.
It's pretty awesome, and a lot of them are entry level ones too. So it's and not only that, but I don't know if anybody remembers a couple of years ago when I started the party games department, because I found that people that play Werewolf and Two Rooms and a Boom and a lot of those things sort of were orphaned and sort of put into departments they don't belong to because they didn't fit into anything. So I created a new department, and I had a brilliant gentleman named William Hillstrom head up that department. And now, not only do we have literally a bazillion of these games now, and the social deduction type of large format games, but we also have a special guest that's a designer for this type of game. So not only are we drawing more players, but we're actually drawing some industry people.
Awesome! Cool.
Into being here. So. It's a con definitely in growth, and we're suffering because of that growth in a certain sense, because we're starting to get critical mass in the amount of space that we can actually take up at the Hilton LAX. So now it's becoming more and more of a challenge to fit all the games and the 2,000 plus people that show up every convention to play them.
So you're going to expand to a second hotel? An adjacent hotel?
We are actually really stuck as to what we can do.
Right.
We have a lot of challenges. And for those people that are really curious about, maybe starting up a convention or running a convention, there are a lot of challenges to it. In the fact that, A, you have to have enough committed volunteers to be able to man all the stuff that you need them to man. Because without I keep telling all of my GMs and the wonderful people that volunteer to run games, and also the wonderful group of people that volunteer to run my HQ, we wouldn't have a convention with people that didn't run games.
Oh, right.
What would we have? We just basically have a meeting area, and people would knit. I don't know, but we do have knitting on the calendar. So it's really just a fantastic community of gamers and nerds and wonderful, beautiful people that just come together and selflessly go through the labor of creating these games, creating characters, handouts. Not only that, but in miniatures, painting a whole bunch of miniatures and letting other people touch them.
Right.
I kind of want to develop a miniatures gladiator game where knitting is the mechanic. So you knit a row in secret, and they knit a row, and then you match the colors up.
Sometimes, Tappy, I go, how does this work? Why are we, you Welsh bastard? I didn't even know you years ago, but we're just so simpatico. But yeah, because stabbing somebody with a knitting needle if they do you wrong is also a great idea. I told him, you can't. This is armament. You can't allow this at con.
You don't want to arm people before the argument phase.
It's exactly. You're going to have a knife sharpening class. But yeah,
reloading class.
Board game tournaments, people bringing in their stuff. It's just amazing to me that there are so many people that are so passionate about gaming that are willing to commit basically 4 straight days to not only enjoying themselves, but making sure that other people are enjoying themselves.
Right.
Because literally this runs Friday through Monday. I show up Thursday night, I wake up Saturday morning, and it's nonstop. The convention never closes. We have games going on 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And that's one of the main challenges we have about space, is that we have to find an area that's okay with activity 24 hours a day.
Sure.
So, your regular convention centers or your community centers or your other type of things that you might think about reaching out to. We were actually looking at places like Orange Coast College, things like that have facilities, but they wouldn't allow us to be able to be open like that for that time period. So,
that's pretty much got to be a hotel.
It's got to be a hotel.
Yeah.
Maybe a Boy Scout camp.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking about just setting up a whole bunch of teepees out in the desert where those 2 dinosaur stores are.
Oh, in Cabazon.
Yeah, that would be so cool and kitschy, wouldn't it? If it wasn't for the fact that it'd probably be hotter than crap, people would die.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You better bring out some trailers of showers.
I mean, trailers of showers here.
Yeah. That is on the way to EJ, and it's probably about 110.
Yeah.
There. Maybe 150.
But in any case, it's... I honestly think that we're probably going to reach about a 2,800 attendee cap, and that's when it's going to start getting... we're going to start rethinking about what we want to do. But the hardest thing about it is that this convention, to us, is kind of unique. And West Coast conventions are a lot like this, in that it's absolutely all about gaming. There's no people trying to premiere TV shows. There's nothing like Comic-Con-y. It's just you show up to the point where we have a seminars department, but nobody ever shows that crap because everybody just wants to play games.
Right.
And really, that kind of feeling is the one we want to preserve at this convention. It's just about gaming, and sort of trying to slip out to other things and maybe make use of spaces that don't run the way that our convention usually runs. We really are very resistant to that. We kind of like what we have.
Sure.
And I think that our attendees really like what we have.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's definitely going to be a challenge, but we're at this hotel till 2020 contractually, I believe. So we at least got a couple more years there to see what we can do. And the previous forays into trying to find another area have not worked out well for us.
Right. It's a pretty big hotel.
It's a huge hotel. Yeah. It's the biggest convention space, hotel convention space at LAX.
Right.
And they love us there, which is great because the whatever room quota, whatever food quota, whatever quota they put in front of us,
Always hit it.
we always hit it.
Well,
It's
I'm
not a
sure there
problem.
are very few fistfights.
Yeah,
I would say few. I didn't say none.
Well, what happens on the board meeting stays at board meetings. I'm not going to say that this kind of organization is all buddy-buddy. There is some contention.
So you do trial by stone?
Well, John was on the board. That's all I got to say. But, no, it's definitely a lot of voices reaching consensus, but to reach that consensus sometimes.
That's got to get worse when you are now competing for space. Too.
Yeah, but one of the worst things about this convention when we first took it over, and this goes into the history of the convention, is that the owners that have it now, which is basically the head guy who's Eric, and the people that took over the convention. There are just a bunch of attendees that decided that they were going to buy the convention off the previous owner, who was basically running it into the ground. And if for the people that actually have been to that convention, like the early '90s, there were very few events. It was kind of sad before then, because it's been around since like the '70s. It's a very old set of conventions. It was just starting to wind down.
It's the first convention I went to, and it was in Anaheim at the Anaheim Sheridan.
Yeah, that was OrcCon, because OrcCon was originally Orange County Con.
Okay,
That's what that was for, and it was held in Anaheim. And there were a few years it was a really, really good con, a very vibrant con. But like I said, it's one of those things where over a span of time you end up sort of losing passion for what you're doing, and you're just going through the motions. And that even happens here, and that's when we get really concerned about department heads that might be burning out, or might be just going through the motions and not being into it as much as they were, sort of swapping things out. Maybe we could find another place for you. But the convention went downhill because people wanted to make too much money off it, and it's not really a money making machine, and people sort of lost interest. The people that were running sort of lost interest in it. So a group of attendees decided to purchase the con, and they pooled their money together and purchased the con. And now we run it pretty much like a nonprofit. Everything that we make on that con is reinvested into the con, and it's literally exactly that. It's a convention by gamers for gamers. The only reason this convention exists is because there is about a dozen or so people that love gaming so much that they took it upon themselves to make this happen.
Yeah, I remember. I was not gaming at the time, but the Boggards got hired by Gen Con West to come and perform, and we split up into two groups. I think you were in the band then, weren't you?
Maybe.
I think you were. And we split up into two separate groups, and one did Saturday and one did Sunday. And I was in the Sunday group, and that convention was not very well attended.
Nope.
Oh, I was there.
Yeah, it was practically empty.
They really made a go of it, and they spent a pretty penny on that.
Oh, yeah.
And it just didn't go off. I mean, I can't really provide any insight as to why it didn't. I don't know. Because I would have thought that something that already had like a fixed name that people knew, easily accessible in the West Coast. All I can say is that West Coast is rough. There's a lot of competing events and a lot of things that you can do on a bright sunny day, which is almost
You've got Knott's Berry Farm, and you have Disneyland, and you have SeaWorld, and
the beach, which is free,
right? And movies,
and all kinds of entertainment.
Cinema. Oh yeah,
a lot of competition for your entertainment dollar in Southern California.
Yeah, it's the same thing the Renaissance Fair has. I mean, it's like we're competing in a part of the country that probably has more entertainment on weekends than any place else in the United States, except maybe New York.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is the entertainment capital of the world. It's Hollywood,
But we also have, I say we have nature too. I mean, we have mountains and beach,
and the weather is
woods
conducive.
and desert,
and you're no more than 2 hours away from any kind of ecosystem.
Yeah.
You can, any kind
exactly.
Of climate
you want to go to the beach, you want to go skiing, you want to, whatever you want to do, you can do it right here, and usually just about any time of the year, really. So, I think that that's also an effect, and I think that this convention has a lot of loyalty because it's just been around here so long, and there are a lot of people that just plan their vacation time around coming to this convention. And one of the great things that I've seen is that people that I used to know and pal around with back when I used to just simply be an attendee, they're here with their kids, their wives. It's become sort of a family affair, and I was talking to one of these gentlemen last con, and he says it's so much cheaper than we can go to Disneyland, and I'll with me and my 2 kids, and I'll literally drop $2,000.
Oh yeah,
easy, just getting in.
You can park copper tickets probably $150, $200.
$175 to $200, I think, is something.
What?
Yeah, ridiculous. And so I can come here. The wife and I can volunteer for 8 hours apiece while the kids run around, get free badges. And all I have to do is pay for a hotel room, and we bring our own food. I mean, really get out of here for about $800 for an entire weekend vacation with us and the kids. Right. And everybody's engaged and having doing something.
Oh yeah, the last 3 cons I've attended, I took both my kids with me, and they've had a blast.
I mean, it's really kid-friendly, and it's one of the things that we're really trying to work on at the convention to sort of focus some more stuff towards having more kids attend. I keep getting things in my crosshairs of things that I want to improve, and Mike and I are usually pretty pushy about getting things done.
What? No. You and Mike?
No, we don't think our ideas are better than everybody else's. No, not at all. We don't work like that. But in any case, it's a good time to be had by all, and we are victims of our own success, and hopefully we can keep this train at chugging as long as we possibly can. And I also wanted to let you guys know that your participation, especially in my department, has been so wonderful, and we appreciate you guys so much. You're very, giving me time on your podcast to promote the convention, even though there are a lot of your listeners. I am very sorry that you are far away and have no interest in this whatsoever.
Well, but we've had listeners from pretty far away.
Yeah.
Fly out here for conventions.
I hope that you had a great time, and I hope that it paid off for you.
England, Japan. I mean, yeah.
Oh yeah, and I remember the one time where the guy came all the way from England, and I met him at the podcast at the convention, and I was just stunned that somebody did that.
I would love to go to a role-playing game convention in Japan, because they have a completely different set of pen and paper RPGs that work very, very different to Western ones. And they're really, really fucking cool. I mean, awesome.
I remember I just picked up a copy of there's a Gundam role-playing game. And just because it was the Gundam role-playing game, it's all in Japanese. I can't read a lick of it and don't know what it is. I look at the pretty pictures and go, but I would love to be able to read it.
Just have Kay run it.
Yeah, have Kay run it.
There's one that I picked up a while ago called Tenra Bantra Zero. That is, it's such a great world. It's got, little kids that are piloting 20-foot mecha that are powered by magic. We have people who have rocket fist hands that also have a magic computer in their brain that has radar. And this is all set in samurai type space. And then you have samurai that have these gems implanted in them that have demons attached to them, so they can use the demon power to Hulk out into these huge forms.
We used to sit there and fantasize about taking L5R to a cyberpunk place.
Yeah, I remember.
the dragon tattooed men. There'd be drugs in the tattoos that would activate them like juicers, and the unicorn would be basically motorcycle gang guys. The crab would have these giant hulking mecha with huge shields and big tetsubos, and we had it all planned out. But yeah, the craziness of the anime style is fantastic.
It's so fun.
It's just so fun. The raw creativity of it. But anyways, Gateway. It's coming up next weekend, over the 3-day weekend. It starts on Friday, it goes through Monday. If you're near Southern California and want to attend, please do. It's a fantastic, good time. I'll be running a role-playing game. There are several members of Happy Jacks that are also running role-playing games. Yep. If you're at all into the Cortex game that I'm in the actual play, Jib is actually running sessions of that game with alternate characters that will affect the plot line of the main story in the actual play. So if you want to participate in that, that's a good time to do it. But we welcome you with open arms. Like I said, it's a great place for men, women, children, families, whatever you are, whatever you want to be. You can be it here. So welcome.
Excellent. And that's strategicon.net if you need more information on that.
I'm just very relieved that blowing up was a good thing. When you started, he's like, we're blowing up.
We're blowing up.
Yes.
So strategicon.net.
Strategicon.net. Yeah, and you can also follow us on Facebook. You just search for Strategicon, we'll pop right up. We also have Twitter, and we're really good about responding to questions on either one of those platforms. So, just check us out. Give us a ring. Let us know what you think. And also, if anybody has any feedback, there's also a great area in the Happy Jacks forum that you can go ahead and ask me questions and or post any significant things that you found over there.
Excellent. In this episode, I should have done this at the very top, the Magic Octopus sends us questions about GMing, small groups, and hex crawls. Steve from Atlanta sends us a success story, and Andreas from Sweden writes in about settings and using food and drink as props. But first, if you'd like to email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. We're on all the social media at happyjacksrpg, all one word. And if you would like to watch the show live, which you should do, it's on Fridays at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Go to happyjacks.org/live, and that will take you to all the places where you can do that, which right now is just Twitch, because we're still in penalty box for YouTube. Fucking tapping.
Yeah, dude.
That's not even my fault.
It isn't the same. I'm used to looking at Kimmy's angry face every time that's brought up.
well, yeah, but it's like, it's...
Oh man, she needs a Tetsubo.
No, you don't want to
She
give
would
her a
Tetsubo YouTube.
You don't want to give her a weapon. Man, you see the guns on that girl? No. I can't run that fast. I am but a mortal, and she is Wonder Woman.
Yeah, she needs to have a Tetsubo when we do the LARP.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
I wonder if we can convince her to get a Tetsubo tattoo. Yeah,
That's awful.
not.
That's an awfully big
awfully
commitment. It's awfully permanent. Maybe a Sharpie tattoo.
Oh yeah. I'll do it. No one will know what it is.
Why is there a long black smudge on your arm?
I don't know, but I punched Happy for it. I probably deserved it.
All right. 2 questions from the Magic Octopus. Hello, douche ballers and ballerinas. I sent this topic to you in February, but I don't think it got covered. I might be wrong, but don't correct me. It didn't.
In all caps.
But now, you see, my email, I use one email address for everything. And boy, it gets full. Like 200 emails a day. Not spam, like actual stuff. Not just Happy Jacks, but work and,
You ever considered splitting that up?
I really like being able to get it all in one place. Then I divide it once I get it. But
I just opened several Gmail accounts and put them all on my phone, so they're just coming in different inboxes.
Right.
And I can just check them.
See, what I do is I open a new Gmail address and I forward it to my regular email address. That way they all show up, because what I try to do is just put stuff
into folders
and then deal with them when the time comes.
But anyways, back to my favorite non-vertebrate.
Due to some unfortunate and even some fortunate circumstances, my previously 5-player group got reduced to just 2 players plus me as GM.
Stop killing your players.
Yeah.
Literal.
Just stop it. I know they're tasty.
First, step 1, stop cutting the brake lines on their cars. All right.
Stop devouring their flesh in the name of your dark god.
Step 2. What would be your advice on running for such a small group? I asked on one forum, and the response I got was, "I've been doing it for years. There are no problems," which wasn't helpful. The problems I've found
I'm drowning here, and you're telling me what the water looks like.
Well, just get better. Get good.
Right. I'm drowning. Oh, I've been swimming for years. It's fine. Character interaction is less dynamic because there's only one other PC. This is my main problem. The players aren't the most proactive role players. Depending on the system, combat can be too swingy. If one character is down, suddenly you're down 50% of your combat power on average. Adding NPCs to the party can be one solution, but that's a lot more work for the GM. And then he has a second question. Let's go ahead and address this one first.
Okay.
One possible solution is something that's done in Apocalypse World, whereas have them make 2 characters and play both of them. Because in Apocalypse World, it's like, oh, well, the GM plays 10 characters or 20 characters or whatever. You can play 2.
Right.
That's okay. Now, you'll have 2 characters and 2 characters. I mean, usually, like, your 2 characters will probably not interact with each other.
That would be one of the drawbacks I can see to that.
Yeah, it takes a very special role player to play with themselves.
Yes.
Right.
But, I mean, you could jump in if they want to talk to one of their other characters. You as the GM could jump in and do that. But that would also give them more stuff to do when you get to the combat section of the game, if it's a really combat-heavy situation.
So I'm not sure what type of game you're running here, but you can get really creative with a 2-character system. Because you don't necessarily have them play 2 PCs. What you can do is have each one play their PC and then have a non-corporeal ally of some sort or some kind of spirit guide or something like that that maybe doesn't really sort of act in line in a combat but sort of provides buffs for the character so they don't feel like they need to play 2 characters. But the cool thing about it is, let's say you have a guy being followed, a couple of guys that are being followed around by spirits. You can have a vignette where they're playing in the spirit world, a new part of the storyline there. Move back to the player characters when they have that, and then or have a situation where all 4 of them are interacting. So you're creating sort of like a little bit of a separation between the 2 characters in a narrative sense that allows it to make a little bit more sense for the players and allows you to basically draw out a couple of characters here and there if it starts getting a little bit too complex to have all 4. You know, there are a lot of different things that you can do to allow player characters to have a little bit more interaction with each other and different things by putting them in different environments and creating different settings. Also, you know, hey, you're down to 2 players. You're the GM. Hate to say it, but it's on your shoulders, bro. Adding NPCs and doing the extra work, that might be something that you just need to do for your narrative. Or you can just run a game like Doctor Who, The Adventures of Doctor Who. Perfect game for just 2 players. A doctor and a companion works out perfect. You don't need
Happy
to
Sith Adventures.
Exactly.
That's not a game, but it
Happy
should be.
Sith Adventures. Actually, we played that. I remember. And when I wrote example in the Rodian's entrails on the floor with my Sith warrior, it was like the Sith warrior comes in, the first person that fucks with me. But you know, there's a lot of stories to be told, and there are a lot of stories that can be told with just 2 players, and you can still create a lot of drama with 2 players. A buddy cop movie type of game works great.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
One thing that I think you don't want to do is make a GM PC.
Yeah.
That is one of the things that I really disliked. Usually I ran into it when I was growing up and there was somebody who was an inexperienced GM, and they would make a PC for themselves to help lead the characters. And it just turned into that character doing everything.
Well, it goes into railroading. And then also, in a role-playing game, the story should be about the player characters.
Yes.
Period. And there's already enough issues as a GM, at least for me, to making sure that each player gets enough spotlight in the story. There's enough problems with that to start creating more. But there are ways of putting NPCs into play that not necessarily take over the plot, but they can be useful, and they don't need to be henchmen. You can actually make mentor characters, or I always love to make a character that the players can go to if they feel like they're completely lost in a story. They don't know what direction they're going, and there's sort of like a sage character that they can go to and just ask a few questions. He's not going to give everything away, but he can nudge characters in the right direction. Because there's nothing more frustrating with player characters when they just don't know where this mystery's going.
Right. And they reach a perceived
wall.
Dead end.
Yeah. And they get super frustrated, and then they start making their own stories to play in. And and
that's
can be fun too.
awful.
Yeah,
which is also super fun. Yeah,
yeah. But you know, if you've put a lot of time into the story, and you really do think that your players would really enjoy it if they actually got to suss it out, then you know that's also an option. But you'll find that if you start creating a vibrant enough world where things start happening to the characters in a dynamic enough way, they will find their way towards interacting with each other in a more meaningful way. And that's really the crux of the problem, right? Is making your player characters play with each other as much as they possibly can in a smaller group, because there isn't enough there isn't enough, grass on the field for you to do anything else.
Well, yeah, I mean but that's a real problem because the dynamic between two characters can only be so complex. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think and I also think there are players who are going to feel more inhibitions about doing so in a smaller group, rather than in a larger group.
I think that second one is true. I don't know about the first one being true. Mm-hmm. In Monster Hearts, that you all should be watching on Mondays on Happy Jack's AP feed.
Right.
We basically had a situation where we have 5 players because there are 2 GMs and they're kind of switching off so the other can also play a character. But we had 3 characters interacting with each other and then 2 characters completely separate for maybe like 4 or 5 sessions. Like we kept on trying to get together and then
split the party, right?
Yeah, but the party was split for that entire time and it worked great.
Right.
Like normally splitting the party is a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And so myself and Mac, our characters just interacted with each other for most of the game so far, and it's worked great.
Mm-hmm.
The thing though is that I think both of our characters have motivations, like clearly defined motivations to ourselves, but that aren't necessarily known to the other, and so you get to explore and discover what that interaction means, rather than simply, coming to the idea of, oh, well, we should do this. Yes, okay. Well,
there are also games that systemically establish relationships between the characters, and I think those really kind of lend themselves to this kind of play. Because when you have a game like Fate, where when you're creating your character, you have to establish a relationship with the other players. That gives you sort of like a touchstone to sort of go, okay, this is what the situation is, and this is where we can take it. And that takes a little bit of creativity on the player's side, but that little investment up front really pays off towards the end.
Right.
And there's also the idea, like you said, what if you have 2 sets of 2 characters in the same story doing different things in the story?
Right.
So, you make 2 sets of characters. They don't necessarily ever have to meet.
Sure.
They're just doing different things. And the cool thing about it is that, they can meta a little bit and have these characters set up certain things for the other characters. And it's kind of
that's super cool.
Oh, yeah.
So, and the cool thing, if you're a really creative GM, you can really start putting really tense situations into the game where they have to either figure out a way to achieve a symmetrical goal between the 2 sets of characters, or just help themselves, or just help the other guys, and depending on the relationship between the 2 sets, or whether they're aware of each other.
Right. Yeah.
And
they may not necessarily have to be.
They may not necessarily have to be. Yeah, exactly. So you could actually have like 2 sets of detectives from 2 different precincts investigating what seems to be different crimes, but are actually one crime.
Mm-hmm.
Or 2 courtiers in an L5R game, and then 2 samurai in the field. And what the courtiers are doing gives the samurai stuff to do.
Exactly.
And then you really buy into that motivation, and then what's happening here is really, really important, because you don't want your Bushi to get screwed over.
Or 2 nobles in a fantasy setting that have a couple of people that do things in the unlikely noble hangout places, and they do a lot of machinations up at the top, and they may be setting plans and playing a big chess game while these guys are in the sewers fighting rats.
Mm-hmm.
So and one affects the other. So there's a lot of ways to sort of expand on 2 players if you're really creative about how you structure your story. Remember, story frames can change the entire environment of a game. Whether you frame it as a part of it as a flashback, or whether you have 2 different storylines that are moving backwards. Look at all these films that use these really kind of unique ways of storytelling that you could go ahead and also use as part of a role-playing game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I ran a groups game in college that lasted a long time, many years. And there was a point where I was down to 2 players, Brian and Fred, for a couple sessions, 2 or 3 sessions, I think. And NPCs became a key part of that. They interacted with each other because they had a lot of history, because it had been a larger group, and it kind of got whittled down over time because of schedule or whatever. Mm-hmm. So the 2 characters already had a lot of real actual history within the game. So there was always dynamics going on between them, but it became very important for the NPCs really started to become a key thing for them key off of.
Right.
Because, I mean, there's a lot of times when I'm GMing, especially when you've got very proactive players. He doesn't have proactive players, so this isn't quite great advice. But there are times when I'm running a game, L5R, or even the vampire game I ran, where I don't have to do much for a session because their own interactions with each other are taking precedent over what's going on.
Yeah,
and
that's my usual normal.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And but it's just that tends to happen less if it's the fewer players there are.
It got to the point. It's like, why do I even bother to write anything fucking down? Just do what you can.
Right. but when as that game whittled down to a couple of players, it grew eventually again. But I found that NPCs and suddenly my prep came back to center stage more than it had before, even with very, very proactive players.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much stuff they're going to do because they're interested in seeing what I've got in store anyway.
Right.
So.
Right, but the more flesh you add to your NPCs, though, the more that the characters interact, and the more the characters are going to draw entertainment from it.
Absolutely.
One of the things that my friend Chris did back in the day when we used to play Shadowrun, so we only had 2 players, but we sort of needed 3 because of the way the game works with classes, not really classes, but professions. Is he says, "Oh yeah, my character is split personality." And he split his pool of points in character generation between 2 personalities, the skill points.
Right.
So he had a Decker and a street samurai, and they were both the same character, but depending on who was in charge at the time.
He only had access to certain skills.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the thing is, he would basically sort of randomize it. He figured out a way that, when I roll this, and when the characters randomly shifted back and forth, so it created an extra challenge in that. But we need the Decker right now. Just give me the Decker! And that was fun, but the thing is, he had one character fit 2 roles in a very unique and creative way to sort of frame a character. And he had completely unique backgrounds for each one. One was imaginary, one was real. He never told us which was which.
That's awesome.
And Shadowrun is a great example of a game that's really easy to bring in NPCs when you need them, and then leave them out when you don't, which is when you put together a team. Right. So the 2 characters might have a run that they do a whole bunch of legwork on, and then put a team together to actually do the run.
But not only that, but you have investigative characters with a lot of contacts that maybe not be great in combat. Make 2 sets of characters. One of them that does all the footwork, does all the contact stuff, and then they have their buddies that take care of the wet work, and then you can actually play the run.
It's like Mephidius Star Trek. There are main characters, and then there are supporting characters. And so you have this pool of supporting characters so that when your Vulcan engineer is stuck on the ship, you can jump down with your human red shirt or whatever and go kick some ass.
Yeah. Actually, in Nominee, if you ever...
I remember in Nominee.
Yeah, it had something that was like that in the fact that, you played an angelic or demonic form, but the way that you would interact on Earth is that you would take over this vessel, and you could have multiples of them. So it sort of created sort of like this dungeon master sort of feel when you ran your character, because you could have different vessels that did different things.
Oh, okay.
And you could totally wrap a game around that, where you have basically one consciousness with a lot of different bodies. Or it would be awesome to do something like Altered Carbon, where you have a bunch of different sleeves with a bunch of different abilities, and you plug yourself into those sleeves.
Well, you can just do an Eclipse Face.
Yeah,
like
Eclipse Face.
And then you can actually, they have forks where you can take your personality, copy it, and put it in another sleeve.
Yeah. So, like I said, man, depending on the type of game you're running, you could totally make it go easy or hard with it. You just
not knowing what system you're running kind of makes it more difficult.
But I highly recommend you don't play D&D with this if you have 2 players, because it doesn't work mechanically.
That'd be tough.
Yeah.
That'd be tough.
It's designed for 4
It's
players.
designed for at least 4 players. You have to have, and they have rules. It's like playing an MMO. You have to have somebody that can absorb some damage. You have to have somebody that can deal some damage, and you have to have somebody that keeps people up.
Yeah,
those are the 3 things you have to have. If you don't have all that, it just makes it really kind of difficult.
And therefore frustrating for your players.
And you could have an NPC member of the party that the players themselves just determine what they do.
What would be fun too is you have a pacifist cleric.
Right.
He doesn't want to fight in any. He'll keep you up, but he won't fight a thing.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Perfect. His next question. I have another question. Has anyone ever ran or played in a Hex Crawl? I'm planning one right now. A Hex Crawl is a sandbox game where the game world is a hex map that the characters go to explore. There is no central narrative, but there are random encounters and keyed locations. The narrative should emerge from the characters interacting with the world. Neat. Since the theme of a Hex Crawl is exploration, how would you integrate character motivations and backstory into an exploration-heavy game? My campaign is going to be the rediscovery of the world after an Earth Dawn-inspired fantasy apocalypse. The characters have lived their lives underground, but now venture outside because the apocalypse has subsided. Any advice here would be most valuable. Thanks in advance. It is remarkable that your podcast is still going strong and remains one of, if not the best in the industry. Thank you. You have hit the perfect balance of entertainment and information. Keep jacking the happy magic octopus.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, my favorite non-vertebrate. Wow.
Isn't that an invertebrate?
Invertebrate, you're right.
Sorry.
Because it's invertebrate.
They have a beak. Am I thinking of a squid that has like this almost cartilaginous strip?
That cuttlefish and squid.
They have a cuttle bone.
Okay,
yeah,
that's it. Cuddle bone. I got a cuddle bone.
You okay there? Yeah, man, I got a cuddle bone.
I got a cuddle bone. Just give me a minute. I got to work through it, all right? I got to take care of something.
Narrative heavy game. Or exploration heavy game.
Go.
No. I've done this in the past. I find this to be especially very front heavy on prep, obviously, because unless you come up with some sort of system to sort of try to figure out what is going to be, because you don't necessarily know what direction they're going to go, and if you don't have a plot hook per se, I think you're eventually going to end up having some plot hooks. I mean,
people love narratives. They're going to build a narrative around something.
Exactly.
So, it sounds
either the players are or the GM is going to.
It sounds like random encounters are going to happen and the players figure out how they are all connected.
Right. And at that point, it's up to the GM to say, why, yes.
Yes. Absolutely.
This entire system is basically fishing for plot hooks.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because, and so your job as a GM when it comes to this kind of sort of random open world game is you just got to cast as often as you possibly can and wait for something to stick. And when your player characters seem to wrap themselves around something, then you just go with it. And because you're really not setting up things on your hex to simply be sort of like a combat encounter. What you want to do is you want to go, this is where you're going. There are goblins. There's a temple. Find out what the temple is. There's something sinister going on that's just beyond the goblins. And you'll know when your players get interested in something. And you'll know and you just need to just work and build on that.
When it comes to integrating character motivations and backstories into an exploration-heavy game, you make the motivations and backstories about exploration.
Why do they leave their... I'm assuming they come from a safe place.
It has to get to
underground somewhere.
But it has to, like, the motivation... There has to be a motivation to explore. So it's like, you all lived underground. You're leaving because there's no more food. Cool. You're finding food. Or maybe there's a threat coming. You go outside and, holy shit, there are orcs. We need to hide until we get something. Like, or I have to leave my home because I've been ostracized because I broke a taboo.
Because my pit boy told me so.
Right.
Like you make the motivations and backstories exploration instead of, well, I'm a carpenter. Okay, cool. How do I tie that into exploration? Well, you don't. Because
you're going to emerge and say, I'm going to build a house.
So, also fun things to do with these kind of games for building motivation too is how long have they been hidden away from the real world? How much do they know about the ancient real world? How much of it is hearsay? How much is actual fact? One of the funnest things to do is sort of describe things in a sort of oblique sort of way where you can describe a refrigerator. It's a rectangle. You see handles on it. There seems to be some kind of piping in the back. You know, and you force the characters to sort of rediscover an entire world that way. And one of the most important things is to have a very clear vision going into it, what that world looks like, and communicate that to your characters. Because once they start building that picture, they're going to start finding things within that picture that they're going to want to gravitate towards.
Right.
So, like you said, very heavy prep. You have to know what you're doing as a GM.
Sandboxes in general require exceedingly heavy prep.
Yeah.
Like, I wrote 25,000 words for my prep for my Traveler game. Like, I wrote half a novel in trying to put that whole thing together, because there's just world building that I'm doing, and then once that world is built, then I have all these places for all the characters to interact with.
You're basically just setting up a canvas for the players to paint on, and the more inviting that canvas is, the more that they're going to start putting paint on it.
I do think that character background and stuff, that's one of those things. I mean, exploring or exploration as a motivating thing, absolutely. But if there's other things on their background, that's stuff that you can mine if you want to start putting out plot hooks and seeing where they want to go. Like to say, go back to the Fallout 4 thing with it. Well, his wife and son are missing.
Right.
So, I mean, that obviously you have a direction that you know this guy's going to try to go.
Also, in that kind of thing, there are also motivations. You can go, what were your ancestors doing before they came down, before the fall? And you want to recoup some of the glory of the old empire.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And again, still, like, no matter what your motivation background is, very few plants grow underground with no light. So it's very hard to farm, and it's very hard to get
rooms. I don't know what else.
Unless you're doing some serious hydroponics,
but you still need light. I mean, I don't even know how it's magic, so maybe they have some sort of light thing for that. But
maybe they just have a lot of mushroom soup.
When you're getting out and an apocalypse happens, that means everything's been razed to the ground. Right. And so, just getting food for everybody is a very easy motivation.
Right.
Aside from everything else, maybe you want to impress somebody because you're in love with them, or you're a carpenter and want to build houses in the sun or something. Just put whatever culture they're in at some sort of risk if they don't do anything.
Yes.
Once that's there, they're highly motivated to fix that thing.
And you're sort of if they're at a beneath sustenance level existence,
right?
That's a fantastic motivator. You're out of water. You've got 3 days.
Right. One of the things that happens in stories sometimes, it's everything's idyllic until something changes it. I kind of like nothing is idyllic and you must change it.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with either of those, but in an apocalypse situation, yes. When I was running EJ, I had enough food and water to keep everybody alive for a month, just all the time. I was very, very consistent about that, because we're a million miles away from anything. If something bad happens, whatever that is, and we can't actually get help or get out, then I'm in charge of making sure everybody stays alive.
Right.
And if there's more people there, I need to be able to keep them all alive for at least a week.
Right.
Which is a lot easier. Mostly water at that point. But once those food start getting low, you are highly, highly motivated to get them back up. So it's that's something that should always be on your characters' minds and about their minds for their culture, whatever that was underground.
Right.
Yeah, and that brings up another point that I wanted to state, was that set a baseline normal. Make sure that you spend some time where they're at before they go exploring to set a baseline normal for your player characters. Because unless they have a baseline normal of what it is to exist in what they're used to, the wonder of what they find outside isn't as appealing or as intriguing, because it's just there.
Right.
But you spend some time, I would say 2 or 3 sessions in wherever they're at, sort of making them understand the conditions under which they live.
Yeah.
And when you let them outside, the radical difference in structure and in the way their lifestyles change will be part of that exploration and will actually start building into motivations for the characters, because they're going, oh my God, how can people not have lived seeing these stars? And you want to get more people to see the wonderful things that you've seen. So you start looking for other outposts of human survivors and bringing them out, because you know that people are afraid of their normal, and they need to have a little courage to come out and find out what's
my brain goes to, oh my gosh, these trees made of iron are carnivorous and are covered with birds on spikes. Oh my God, this is horrible. Why am I even out here? Oh, there, because everybody's starving.
Who hurt you, man? Who hurt you, man?
And then you really have to like move on and
no, I totally get it, though. But you can do it either way. I mean, one of the things that I did was I ran a Mechton game where everybody was a member of one of these sort of robo sports. Everybody got into power armor, and they did like this sort of like soccer-ish type sport. But I set this. We played for months just doing this in like Hyper Tokyo or whatever it is. The thing is, they ended up finding out that it's like. What was the name of that anime? I can't remember now. But they were basically in a large
One Punch
spaceship.
Man.
No, they were in a large spaceship that was basically an arc that was set in orbit of Earth after
Space Battleship Yamato?
No. The thing is, they figured out that the apex of human culture was 1985.
Oh no!
So basically, they created a culture that was 1985 that lasted for about 100 years because it was a manipulated culture inside the spaceship, and then they find they actually fall into the actual space Megazone. That's what Megazone 23 is the name of the anime that does that. And they found that they're actually on a ship, and then it turned into an exploration game because I had the entire under part of the ship mapped out, and their whole thing was to find the central memory cortex that would return the ship back to Earth.
Okay.
So they lived for like 6 months of game time in that structured world, and then when they left it to this dank, dark place that actually had some alien stuff in it, it totally freaked them out because they didn't know how to react. That wasn't part of their. They were so used to the character they were playing and doing the things that they were doing. Now they're completely ill-equipped for their new mission, and they had to figure it out. So that's one way of looking at it too. Is that you can have you flip them upside down on what normal is, and that's one of the cool things about having that kind of game.
Oh man, you totally inspired a game in me now, where it's a heavy gear mega rugby team that is on a cruise to their next place, and then the ship gets hijacked by terrorists, and so they have to go down and get in their rugby mecha suits, but they don't have any guns or anything on it. They're not like
they're not military,
or anything. But then they have to go and go through the different levels of the ship, and it's like a huge feck-off like ship with civilians everywhere.
And then it turns into Metroid. It's like a platformer.
That kind of reminds me of did you ever see I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, the miniseries Ascension?
No, I haven't seen that.
That's about a generation ship that's launched in the 1950s.
Oh, I remember hearing about that, but I haven't heard about it.
And basically...
Where is it? What is it on?
It was on Netflix. It might still be on Netflix. I'm not sure. But it basically, this super wealthy guy launches this generation ship in the 1950s, and they kind of bounce back and forth between the ship and Earth, and it's the 2010s on Earth. But society on that ship has stuck in the 1950s.
Oh no!
So and
sucks to be a girl.
The dichotomy between those two civilizations is fantastic. I won't say anything else more about the show.
Yeah, that's super fun.
But really good.
Well, anyway. Magic Octopus, I hope we answered your questions.
Yes. And thank you, Magic Octopus, for sending in the email.
Yeah,
twice. A success story from Steve in Atlanta. Who would like to read Steve in Atlanta's success story?
I'll go ahead and do it.
Okay.
Hey, he's doing another language here. Right after I volunteered to do it. Saluti compagni, gociatori di gocci. I believe is the way. Giochi.
That could also be Esperanto.
If it is Esperanto, kudos to you.
I started to try to learn it in college once.
I think everybody started to try to learn it.
I've started to try to learn so many languages, and I just fucking suck at them.
Right. I just figured, Esperanto, because it's the universal language.
So it's love.
I have a Dresden. I wanted to write. Okay, I wanted to write about a wonderful experience in my last gaming session. I have a Dresden Files game set in 1897, Turin, Italy. Freaking awesome. I started with 5 players, 3 women, 2 men, but life caused 2 players to drop, so down to 2 women and 1 man. And none of these characters are fighty at all. So it was an RP-heavy game, lots of fun so far. As the session got closer, my wife and I decided to get a babysitter for my son so she could join us as well. Side note, previous email, she played the psyker that I shot in the head. You love your wife, yeah. So we're up to 4 players now. Awesome. Then one of the players asked if her 12-year-old daughter could join us. She did it the right way and asked the group for honest opinions. We all agreed to give it a shot, warning it may not be the right style of game for her. I told her I welcome anyone to my table at least to find out if it is a good fit for them and the others. So we're back up to 5 players, yay, and the 2 new characters actually have some knife skills. We jumped right into the mystery and drama, and the new characters were brought in easily.
I'm glad they can cook.
Right.
Oh, wait.
Knife skills are superb. Chop this onion. Wrong! I wanted to get a fight in, mainly to show how the rules work. Everybody got it right away, and the bad guys were defeated. The most interesting thing was that the 12-year-old was told, since you took out this bad guy, you decide how. Are they knocked out, scared away, killed, etc.? That's how the rules work in Dresden. She thought about it for a minute and said, I kill him. Her mom slowly looked around at her daughter, and we all laughed, all except for the 12-year-old. She looked at the sheet and confidently proclaimed, it says on my sheet, I am not nice. I am not a nice person. More laughter. The game continued along with many great memories and laughs. People went home. In my after-game prep, I updated my NPC plans and noted the new NPCs they met. I created a new NPC for the next session, the Inspector, who would be looking for the 12-year-old as a suspect in a murder.
Excellent.
Score 1 for the consequences in a real-life session.
Right.
She did an awesome job jumping into character, learning the rules, and not following meekly behind. I think she has a great future in RPGs. Kudos to her.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's freaking awesome.
Harumph.
Watch your harumph. The other thing
Watch your ass. I'm going to get a harumph out of that guy.
I'm going to get a harumph out of that guy. The other thing I want to bring up.
This thing's swamped.
Give the governor harumph.
We actually have a guy who runs Rock Ridge as a miniatures game and dresses up as the governor.
As a miniatures game?
No, he actually took the Wild West rules that Games Workshop has, bought all of the buildings, and has Rock Ridge.
Does he have the little...
Yes, he has it all. And he wears the governor's outfit with the underwear and the...
Mr. Lepedamine.
Governor Lepedamine. So freaking good. But I'm sorry, back to you, sir. The other thing I want to bring up, I have changed my GM style over the last few years, mostly because of podcasts like Happy Jacks. Thank you. I create NPCs, give them goals and resources, and update after a session to see what may have changed. They don't automatically update, depends on what kind of contacts they have, etc. I let the goals of the NPC form the obstacles for the PCs where they intersect.
Yep.
Sometimes by accident.
Yeah.
It is a refreshing way to GM, and I find I am much more relaxed at the game table, and my post-game headache is a lot less now. There are still some larger plot lines to give the PCs some direction, but very few details are written down in advance. I love it. Thanks for the entertainment, information, and general camaraderie from your Atlanta gaming friend. Cheers, Steve from Atlanta. P.S. If you are in the Southwest around Labor Day, come see DragonCon. Been going on since '92.
I heard DragonCon's really big.
Yeah, it's fucking huge.
It's fucking huge and has a great cosplay community, too, from what I hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to go to DragonCon really badly because one of my players lives in Atlanta.
Oh, right.
So he's been over here a bunch, but I haven't been over to Atlanta.
I would love to attend DragonCon.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, I got something to do every Labor Day weekend anyway.
I don't.
I do.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, wait.
You're going to con?
Oh, yeah, I am. Damn it.
But that doesn't preclude me from going to other cons.
That's true. But what happens to the RPG section if you go to another con for the weekend?
Tomes takes over for a weekend.
Okay.
Oh.
And he's going to be running games on demand again?
He's running games on
Awesome.
demand.
Excellent.
I trust him absolutely.
I was thinking
By the time you
Day.
come back from Atlanta, Suddenly, no one's going to be running anything but Powered by the Apocalypse. Watch. Or
Everything's going to be a hack of something.
Or something no one's ever heard of.
Yeah.
It's all 10 candles at every table.
You know what? I wouldn't be mad at that. Have you played 10 Candles? That game's fucking amazing.
I ran it. We did an actual play. I ran it.
Awesome.
It was. I got to do it again.
I have not yet gotten to play it. I really want to.
Okay, we're going to organize for you a 10 Candles game and a diplomacy game.
Fuck yeah.
The wife and I played a 10 Candles game that Tones ran last con, and it was just very happy.
It is so good.
But dude, you are doing it so right. A,
Yeah.
parenting done right.
Yeah.
B, dude, the only way to remove the shackles of all of this tension of trying to push your characters in the direction your story wants to go is to release it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let things happen organically, and it's just so much better for the players and for the GM.
And he's got it. When you're coming up with NPCs, probably the most important thing is what do they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably. I mean, personality quirks and outlook on life, all that stuff is important as well. But what they want really defines who that character is going to be more than anything else.
Well, and I think that is also true of PCs and why people really need to think about what their characters want.
Yeah.
And when you have people who are really clear on what their characters want, interacting with NPCs who are very clear on what they want, and those two things are not the same.
Oh yeah. That's how combat happens.
A lot of people,
or drama, or intrigue, or...
A lot of people told me that they have problems because they want to be proactive and not reactive as a GM, and I get that because you want to make sure that everybody's entertained, and sometimes the only way that you can ensure that is making sure that everybody's focused in one direction, and I get that. But when you come up with a situation where you clearly know what everybody in the plot's end result wants to be, it's a lot easier to manipulate the situations through the own NPCs and player motivations instead of trying to create these situations where you're sort of like trying to force people in a direction. You don't have to force anything if you know what somebody wants.
Right. And I mean, I really like playing a reactive GM because, again, that means the players are going where they want to go.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, again, Apocalypse World doesn't do everything the best, and it's not the best for every system or for every world you want to run it in, but the system is set up where you are reactive. Right. They do something, then you get to do something, and they do something, then you get to do something. You get to do something based on what they do. That is how the system works, and it's set up to make sure that players have agency. You can have agency in all games. You just have to make sure, if you're a proactive GM, you have to make sure that you're not forcing it. You gotta tease it a little bit. There's like a little rub, and then maybe just get a little tip in.
Yeah,
and then
you know what?
And also maybe just talk to them.
Open the flower of the story first. Open the flower of the story, and it's a lot easier than just trying to force the petals open. Put a more lighthearted edge on this metaphor. But in any case...
Don't put an edge in there, that's bad.
No.
Don't think shame.
Ain't no shame in that game, bro. But nonetheless, it really will completely change your life as a GM when you start looking at things towards that perspective. Because if you're trying to strong-arm people into following your plot, you're just going to get dissatisfied players that are just going to go, well, I guess this is what I have to do, and just roll dice.
Yep.
Yeah, kudos.
Yep. Great job, man.
Settings. Food and drink from Andres in Sweden. Go.
Sweden. No. Hi, Stu. Oh, it is yours.
Oh, damn.
I'm feeling not so imaginative in a hot and muggy Sweden.
What?
You gotta read like this. I'm feeling not so imaginative in a hot and muggy Sweden.
So the salutation is a bit less extravagant today.
Now you sound like the priest from Saturday Night Live. What was his name?
Tito. Father Guido Sarducci.
Father Guido Sarducci.
That's Sarducci, not after listening.
So go back to your own voice.
I felt
Sorry I did that.
I have to share some thoughts I have on the use of props and the value thereof. I'm a huge fan of props.
So am I.
When playing in quote-unquote deep settings, i.e. settings where there is a lot of setting information and social roles and mores, like the eels.
Right, exactly. But with no Y.
To be of great value. In a game of orcs and elves, most people don't need any help to nudge their imagination, as there are so many common cultural references. But in a setting that feels weird, like medieval quote-unquote Japan is to Americans and Europeans, like L5R, I think they're a great tool. I will offer up 2 examples from my own gaming experience. When we played Bushido, an old FGU game set in Japan.
I know that.
Oh, that's
Fantasy games
way
Unlimited.
back, yeah.
That's way back. Actually, they made a new edition recently.
Really?
Of that. Yeah.
Oh,
Because
man,
I know
I
they
didn't
put out.
Are they still around?
Yeah, they started in the mid-'70s, right?
No, I think another company got it because I saw Bushido miniatures being produced again.
Wow. That is a long callback. Our Game Master's kid cooked us up a Japanese meal, served with black lacquer chopsticks. At another game, when I was game mastering a game set in Tecumel, I served a meal of beef stew and sweet potato, which works excellent as a melu
Milieu?
stew?
stew.
No.
The H is silent.
Melu stew. Eh?
Well, why not?
Sipping mash wine and chumetel. Fuck this.
We respect all foreign languages and peoples.
Yes.
Well, sometimes it's difficult.
Sometimes
to read.
difficult. I don't think these are Swedish words.
I know that they're from a culture different from the 2 ones that I'm used to.
Yes. Yes. Definitely respect all, especially food. I respect all cultures' food.
I don't respect English food.
I love English food. Pies? Meat pies? Are you fucking serious?
All right.
Pasties?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yorkshire pudding isn't pudding.
They invented the goddamn language. They can call it whatever the fuck they want.
Our pudding isn't pudding.
Okay, well then what's our pudding then?
Moose?
Yeah.
But it's not. It's a totally different
Artificial
texture.
moose?
Yeah.
Oil moose?
Really,
Chocolate flavored
ours
mud.
is
It's like a
not even like it's
custard?
custard. Yeah,
Yeah,
it really is
like
a custard.
flavored custard, yeah.
Yeah.
So we really should call it Jell-O custard.
Well, it's just
No,
custard and Jell-O.
Well, custard
is-
technically has dairy in it. I don't think that has any dairy in it.
Oh,
No,
there's
it
no
does.
food in it.
You use milk to make Jell-O custard.
Let's
Or
just
Jell-O
say
custard.
it's the
Jell-O pudding.
craft dinner of desserts.
Yeah, or you could just make custard and then add like chocolate powder to it.
You
like,
can get some of that. What's that Italian cheese that's somewhat flavorless? It's like a cream. Oh God, I can't.
mascarpone.
Mascarpone.
Yeah.
And put chocolate in it, and it's delicious.
That's the only cheese that tastes like water.
And it's
I love mascarpone. Are you serious? Oh no, it's so good.
man, your food tastes, sir.
I like everything.
We are against you.
When I went to England, I had 2 good meals. No, that's not true. I had more than 2 good meals, but I had 2 good meals. I had good meals in 2 places. Indian food in London
That's some of the best
Indian food is
in the world.
delicious, yeah,
actually.
was freaking awesome.
Birmingham has its official dish is tikka masala.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And the other place was in Bath, because as you're getting to Bath, you're passing tons of farmland. And I ordered a salad in a restaurant in Bath, and I almost cried.
Because it's so good.
It looked like a salad. It wasn't brown.
Yeah.
And the vegetables were crisp and fresh, and I'm like, I missed you so.
When I was in New York, my brother and I passed a pub that had super nachos in the window. And so in nachos, oh man, I haven't had Mexican food in almost a week. Let's go get some nachos.
Oh, Southern Californians.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Oh no. It was like stale Tostitos, ground beef, some beans, cheddar cheese.
It's like ordering the sashimi at a steakhouse. But why?
Or at a grocery store.
At a grocery store.
But then when we got up
Like
to
Stork
Edinburgh,
does every week.
we got haggis there. And Oh my fucking god,
haggis
it's
is the
delicious.
bomb. Yeah.
Fucking delicious.
Real haggis is amazing, no matter what.
I had
anybody
haggis once in America and it tasted like falls.
calls. No, I mean, but haggis
like
done
haggis-
right.
yeah,
Well,
oh my
I
gosh.
used to go,
Yeah.
there used to be a homebrew supply place in Downey that I used to go to all the time, and his wife, I think, was a English expat, and she had a lot of family there, so they would ship stuff to him that he would sell in the store, and he had frozen haggises and blood pudding and all kinds of stuff that he would have and sell there, but it's stuff from there. It's not.
Yeah.
Blood puddings are cool, but it's nothing like morcilla.
No.
What's that?
That's a Spanish blood sausage. It's
I will
just the
absolutely
best.
try that. But back to this other stuff. Or it's like called in our world apricot brandy and lassi, which
Oh, okay.
both delicious.
What is lassi? I don't know.
Lassi
Lassi
is
is a yogurt drink,
Yeah.
an Indian yogurt drink.
Oh,
Sometimes it's
okay.
flavored
Yeah.
with mango.
Yeah, I love mango lassi,
Yeah,
but I like yogurt everything.
yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
yogurt's awesome.
Yeah. And the players found it impossible not to be immersed. So I'd suggest food and drink to be the ultimate prop. LARP yourself to immersion. To conclude, a question. Don't use an immersion blender though, because that.
Well, to make a
would
lassi,
just
I think you
hurt.
could do that.
Well, you can, but then, if you have
not your friends.
Oh no, not on your friends.
no, but I mean, if you have someone with no teeth,
Oh yeah.
you might want to blend the sushi
Blend the
for them
haggis, yeah.
and give them a sushi Slurpee.
Oh my god. No, that's known as chum.
Yes, it would be. Yes.
And if you fed that to me, we would no longer be chums.
Well, you have teeth. I wouldn't do that.
To conclude, a question. I am a sucker for deep settings, and things like Glorantha, Tecumel, or Tadazlanta really draw me in. I know some of the Happy Jacks hosts love World of Darkness and L5R, some other game worlds with a lot of lore, but how about settings not based on our world? Are there any lore-rich settings you all like, and what are your feelings about those, and how they help or hinder your game with their barrier of entry for immersion? Anyway, drink! Andreas.
Lots of things to talk
Lots
about.
of things.
Because
So
tappy in my wheelhouse right now.
I don't know if I've actually mentioned this on the show. I went to a Japanese culinary school. I'm actually a sushi chef and have been for about 20 years. And I literally pitched this idea to Geek and Sundry as a show. Like, making food for your role-playing group for the game that you're running in order to make it more fun and immersive, etc. I have a treatment done for an L5R cookbook that I'm actually like a quarter of the way done, like actually putting recipes together for. So like I am 100% down with this.
Now, I'm of the opinion that there are two things that define culture in a way that other people can relate. One is language, one is food. Mm-hmm. Those are the keys. If you ever really want to be really connect with the culture, eat their food, learn their language.
There's a writer I really like named S.M. Sterling who has written with almost everybody in like the fantasy science fiction realm in like the 90s. But wrote, especially books that he wrote by himself, he'd have this massive appendix session. And oftentimes would have like types of food they would eat, like how long they've been in a certain area, certain of their languages.
Hell, Dragon Riders of Pern, they had a recipe for that coffee bark drink.
Yeah, claw. I've made it.
Yeah, so
with my niece when I got her the book, we've made bubbly pies.
Nice.
I mean, it's really important. Like once you start getting into the food a culture is eating, then you start really making that culture immersive. Like you're making it real. Mm-hmm. Like for L5R, I have like opinions on what each of the different clans' food is like based on how I feel about the culture. Like the Lions' food is the most like what we know as a Japanese. And the reason I feel that way is because they are very much steeped in tradition.
Yeah.
So it's the most traditional clan, has the most traditional food.
The way I interpret them is that it's traditional Japanese inland food.
Right.
The Crane have traditional Japanese seafood.
Well, I like the Crane to be more experimental with their food because they're the ones who create what
Yeah, they're
like,
the artists.
new food is. Like there's a place called Ennaka here in LA that is, it's the best kaiseki that I've ever had, which is a very formal traditional Japanese meal. But the woman who is the chef, it's very unusual it's more usual now, but it's very unusual still for a woman to be the head chef of a very, very upscale restaurant like that. And she does really interesting twists on everything that you would not find in any sort of traditional kaiseki. And that sort of food is what I see the crane doing.
Oh, okay. Right. That makes sense.
But anyways, yeah, I mean, food could actually be a great way to introduce immersion into a game, especially when you're first starting off with something like that, or even when you're role playing, actually being at a banquet or a meal as your character is eating that food to sort of give it the full.
Like an in-character meal, but an actual meal.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I would love that. That just sounds great and entertaining to me in general.
And if you're doing like a Western D&D style game, stew is really easy to make.
Oh, yeah.
And you get some good crusty bread, and you guys can just have a great time.
Yeah, stew is almost universal in the Western world.
Chili.
Yeah. I like to think of chili as Western curry.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But there are a lot of props and a lot of ways that you can introduce immersion into a game. I mean, even if it's just like I learned a lot. I learned some origami because my character knew origami, and I wanted to bring stuff to the game where I had like the little frog and the crane and stuff, and I would give it away as gifts. But I think that although they're great tools to building immersion, it's absolutely no substitute for really wrapping your brain around a culture and a character. I mean, I think that these things should be sort of introductory things, should be like things that will draw you into it, but it's not something that's going to replace all of the hard work that you do, maybe doing some research on things, doing some and building up some background for your character. Like in Cortex for Edison, I did so much research on British nobility. I did a bunch of research on literally the type of science that I have the character practicing. I tried to learn as much as I can about what I built the character of the background to be and the culture that he came from. And I am personally been enriched by the deep Wikipedia dives that I've done simply because I wanted to build a character that has certain background or from a certain setting. It's one of the great things about RPGs is the fact that it'll open your mind to whole completely new worlds of stuff.
When I first ran L5R, the L5R 4th edition book is probably the only RPG book I read cover to cover. And I started in the very beginning. Have you read the 4th edition book at all? They start out with, here's the origin story of this world. And it literally takes you by the hand and takes you through, this is why this culture is this way. And they do a really good job of pulling you into it. The problem is, I think you're an exception as a player.
Okay.
Most players, very few players are going to go through and read a 30-page introduction to Game World. I mean, there are some.
Yeah.
But in my experience, not very many.
Research is also one of my favorite things, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, maybe we're just a special kind of nerd.
Right.
You know?
But I mean, literally, most players, they won't. They just won't do it. The GM, and that's kind of why it's the GM's job to sort of be the sort of, well, your character is from here, so you would know these things. Oh, okay, and and to try to lead them along in that way. But it's very, I don't know. Even with good players, it's very rare to give them more than a couple pages of stuff.
Background.
I would actually disagree that food is somehow a substitution for research. Just because in order to really get into like what they eat and why, you really have to get into what the culture respects, what's around them.
I agree.
If you start looking at, say, like the crab, their food is about very hearty and stores well.
Right.
That's what they want.
Right.
And that is extrapolated from the entire culture of that group.
I just think of Big Trouble in Little China, where they're in that pit with all those fish, and the guy picks up the dried fish and just bites the head off. Want some? Hey. But let me rephrase what I said. What I intended to say is that use of props in general is no real substitute. Food is a little bit different because there's a culture, there's a unique cultural touchstone to it. So, right. But the thing is, you can't have a meal all the time in every game.
Right.
No.
And it's a cherry on top of your character. Your character's not made of cherries.
But the thing is, it can be used to inspire your players' curiosity, and if you inspire your players' curiosity, they might actually go to that at nth degree.
Right. Sure.
And it could very well be that as a player, they were never titillated or excited about trying to find out about another culture. But if you're playing with a game group that plays a more standard type of fantasy or sci-fi setting, that's sort of like Star Trek-y, Star Wars, D&D, L5R, but L5R, not L5R, but D&D or Pathfinder. That's one thing, because all those cultural moorings are sort of like standardized. But games like L5R and games like the ones that you mentioned are a completely different animal, and require you to invest yourself as much into the culture as into the gameplay.
I can't imagine an L5R game where no one has gone to the trouble, where like even the GM has not gone to the trouble.
You couldn't do it.
That would be such a hollow experience. It'd basically just be any other fantasy game except with
it's the 3.5 edition of Oriental Adventures, which is basically exactly what happened.
I really want now for you to run a Castilian 7th Sea game, and we have tapas every game.
That would be awesome, actually.
Right?
Well, I am a Sandoval.
I know.
Actually, legitimately, if like 280 people died spontaneously, I'd be king of Spain.
279. 278.
But now going on to the other questions about games that have immersive settings that are not traditional real world type or fantasy settings. Anything by FASA from the 80s has stacks of novels and literally hundreds of years of background usually attached to it. Look at BattleTech. There's literally about 2,000 years of lore.
It's incredible.
Their timeline starts in the 80s.
I only know one person who has read all of it.
Yeah, and he's
he knows
a
it all.
madman. Shadowrun has
incredible
tons of background story. What other games?
Earth Dawn?
Earth Dawn. But Earth Dawn could actually totally be put into the Shadowrun thing because it's basically Shadowrun's prehistory.
Yeah.
In any Warhammer role-playing game.
Warhammer role-playing game. Oh my god, the lore. And those are just a few mentions. A lot of these games have novelizations, have hundreds and hundreds of game supplements. You can also try somewhat unique settings that may not be traditional for you. I mean, like if you're a GM and you're a Doctor Who fan, you have a bunch of players that have never watched Doctor Who. Introducing them to the Doctor Who mythos is tantamount to introducing them to a whole new culture.
Oh yeah,
and they have to really be interested in doing that.
Yeah,
like you need buy-in.
You need buy-in.
What it comes down to.
The thing is, games like that, games like L5R, which I'm going to use as my prime example, are just unique in that they require a certain amount of investment by the players in trying to mold their head around a completely different way of thinking. Because when you're playing L5R, you have to understand samurai means servant. It's a service-based culture. Your personal identity and who you are is not as important as your loyalty to your daimyo. So it's such a radically different way of thinking for like your cowboy centric sort of narratives that you see in the West. That really going in there and understanding that no, I would very much rather kill myself than do X or Y.
Right.
It's difficult. I mean, when we first started playing L5R, literally the first game of L5R we ever played as a group that wasn't a playtest run by John Wick, I let my character die Kenobi style because losing the duel was more politically satisfactory than winning it. And
fucking badass.
And the thing is, the very first game, and everybody just looked at me and went, so that's how we're going to play this game. Yep, that's how we're going to play this game.
Damn straight.
Yeah, and it was fucking awesome.
It's like, yeah, it just totally Kenobi'd out. And I wouldn't have done that in any other game other than L5R because I understood what sacrifices needed to be made by certain samurai. And there were great mechanics in the game that if you died honorably and had a good death, you got a whole bunch of points to make a better character to follow up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah, the thing is, the whole game, the game was designed around your character. Your character is going to die doing something noble and sacrificial. So let's give you a bonus, a Benny to do that. Some kind of motivation to do that. But yeah, unless you have players that really want to invest in that, you're sort of losing half of the fire of the game.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. You have to tailor your game to your table, and you have to be smart enough to know what will and won't play. It's great to experiment, but that's what one-shots are great for.
Yeah, and if they go, wow, I really like this world, then they can get into it and make a character that's more for it. One of the things that I kind of want to bring up is, like, in a game of orcs and elves, most people don't need help to nudge their imagination. I don't know if I agree with that statement, because elves and orcs can have very different cultures based on what the GM is trying to do, right?
Sure.
I mean, your orcs are very different than Tolkien orcs.
Yeah.
Elves can be done in many, many different ways. I mean, just they have pointy ears and are skinny is kind of like the same defining factor. And I think it's really interesting if you want to do food as an immersion thing. Make orc food, make elven food.
Actually, we
Right?
played Star Trek once, and I invented a Klingon dish for the group, and like because it was really tasty, but it was like kind of weird because what I did is I took some tamales and I cut off the ends and put them in segments, so it looked like a worm. So basically, the whole thing was that they force fed this worm this meat and let it ferment, and that was the whole Klingon thing. But it looked the part, but it was completely delicious.
That's so rad. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to eat at a restaurant earlier this year. It was a 16-course meal.
Holy.
But every single course was very, very small. And it was in the springtime, so it was all seasonal, and so they had edible flowers throughout all of it.
Oh, lovely.
And like, so one of the appetizer courses was like this cookie that was made of caramelized and slightly burnt onion, like mixed in with like a barley flour.
Oh, man.
And then there was a very tart, almost like a currant jam on it, and then these edible flowers, like about 15 tiny edible flowers that were very like minty, placed on it. And that was one of the courses. That is fucking high elven food right there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Sure.
And so, like, with that in mind, now I totally want to do an elven dinner because I've had this thing that inspires me. So,
But back to your point, though, there's a drastic difference between Scandinavian elves and Irish Fae.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of different interpretation where it comes to, and one of the greatest things about playing in a fantasy setting, and the reasons why we love people like Tolkien is that they built this really vivid, rich world. And when you're running that kind of game, a lot of these things are left purposefully generic for you as a GM, so you can actually fill in the blanks for those individual cultural touchstones that you might want to introduce.
Oh, yeah.
So you can have a deeply fulfilling, rich political game in a fantasy setting that's radically different than anything you've ever noticed if you just go through the trouble of making it up.
Right.
I don't ever want to run a game that is less deep or immersive than L5R. Like, that is my goal, to go that deep or deeper, depending on, I mean, L5R is has a large country with many different cultures in it. But whatever I'm doing, I've made these 5 different cultures for the Traveler games that I wrote languages for them. Right. You know, I was like, this is the type of clothes they wear. This is, their social mores. This is,
Yeah, well, like, my dwarves in my fantasy setting, the king just owned the bank.
Oh,
That's
and
all the king
and
did.
insurance is how he made money and stuff.
And basically, the reason
user-
why he was king is because he actually owned all the actual physical resources, and then the merchant guilds needed to borrow money from them to do their thing. So that's the reason why he was king.
Okay.
And their language, their written language, only the names of nobles had rounded parts. Because it's easier to chisel straight lines. So things of high import, their gods, their nobles, all had a separate curved language that was specifically more difficult to craft. Because the dwarves thought the more difficult the craft is, the more you honor whatever it is that you're representing.
That's awesome.
I mean, I had all
That's so cool.
I had all these individual little cultural things about my dwarves and the class system that they lived in and the way that they got married and all this stuff. And I made it up. Why? Because I love the race, and I had an entire campaign set in this dwarven hold that was a fallen dwarven hold. But the thing is, almost like archaeologists, the players ended up learning all these things about the dwarven culture. And in the final conflict, the fact that they knew dwarven culture because they were fighting a mad dwarven god was what saved them. All those little things were little clues.
Oh, that's so cool.
To that part.
I mean,
I mean. A lot of different ways you can use culture to make things more immersive.
I think this is one of the reasons, like this topic is one of the reasons why I like to run sandbox games, because I put so much effort into the world that I'm exhausted and I want to have a fucking story too.
But once you've done that, I mean,
yeah.
whenever you do a game, your world building is almost always going to be if you're not using an already predefined setting, that's always going to be your biggest
investment.
Your biggest investment.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And to come up with one plot hook after that does not take that much longer.
That's true. Well, but what happens is I come up with one plot hook, they do it, and then go in a completely different direction, and I have a great time.
Right.
But the thing is, you built this huge sandbox, so you're fine.
So you're fine.
Right.
Players sometimes will find their own motivation.
And it's so great. Well, yeah, that was Bill in my Traveler game. He got pissed off because of part of the backstory, like of one of the cultures that he found out that his character didn't know about. He got furious, convinced everybody to go with him, and they went on, this crusade. It was awesome.
I would love to follow Bill on a crusade. I'm all for it.
Fair enough.
FYI, I just looked up Fantasy Game. Was it Fantasy Games
FGU.
Unlimited?
Yeah.
FGU.
They still exist.
Oh my goodness!
I'm right now buying a PDF of Space Opera.
Oh no!
Which is still available. I know. We tried playing it, but I want to try again.
That game was systemically horrible, though.
I remember us spending 6 hours trying to make characters.
Yeah.
Very complex.
Very primitive game.
There's a reason why modern systems are modern.
Right, but I'm going to get it and take a walk down memory lane.
I think it's also great to just parse old systems. Like, why did they? It's almost like archaeology. Like, why did they think this was a good idea?
Right.
Like, what sort of things were they going off of? What ideas?
I tried to do that with Palladium, and I almost went mad.
No. But the fact that he's never changed it makes you go mad.
And actually, I am mad. I'm just covering up real good.
All right, should we end it?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's good.
Next week, we won't be doing a show on Friday night because we're going to be at a game convention. But Saturday at 8 p.m. Pacific time, go to happychecks.org/live. If everything goes correctly, we will be streaming live from Gateway 2018. Right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Gateway 2018.
I
It's
think-
Orcon, GameX. Gateway is the gateway to the next year.
I'm talking about...
That's a good way to remember.
No, I mean right as in if everything goes correctly.
Everything's going to go great.
Okay.
When doesn't it?
Their internet connection's okay.
It's okay, man. The thing is, I have somebody to blame if something goes wrong, and it makes me perfectly happy to
And
point
that's
that finger.
all you need.
That's all I need.
All right.
Fuck you, Mike.
It's Mike's fault.
Yeah, it is.
He should have been here.
Nobody's more disappointed than I.
Thank you for joining us for season 22, episode 13 of Happy Chicken Surfing Podcast. My name is Stu.
This is Tappy.
This is Jim.
And we'll see you at Gateway 2018, whether you're there or not. And let's see, Sunday we're playing L5R again. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
And there's games next week. Go to happychecks.org/schedule to find all that information.
Yeah,
That's
please join Team Beatstick in L5R.
Join Team Beatstick. Thank you very much for the song.
Dragons, heroes. find the fatal savage lands. Evil plots will be usurping, though we could do with less burping. Happy Jack's podcast will be douchebags all.
There are many organs in the torso. Some are less important, some are more so. Some they make us laugh and some they give us gas. But if they preclude my drinking, then they must go.
Oh, liver, let die. Liver, let die. Oh, God, please deliver. Cirrhosis of the liver. Liver, let die.
Well, the barber surgeon used to tell me that my nightly drinking, it would kill me. He said there was no doubt that my liver would give out, but nothing but that foam yield will fill me.
Oh, liver, let die. Liver, let die. Oh, God, please deliver. Cirrhosis of the liver. Liver, let die.
So let's drink a toast unto my passing, and with all those aspersions they are casting, it appears I'll be the last. So to those that pass, I'll raise a glass, for it seems that all my doctors I am outlasting.
Oh, liver, let die. Liver, let die. Oh, God, please deliver. Cirrhosis of the liver. Liver, let die. Oh, liver, let die. Liver, let die. Oh, God, please deliver. Cirrhosis of the liver. Liver, let die.
The preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire.
Bum, bum, bum.